my first question, I always like asking this health status for a lot of the guys that went through a pretty physical game. It always is with Clemson. But how did it look? And also, what are guys during practice this week? Any kind of concerns on NC State's side of some guys we might not see on Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, they came out relatively healthy from Saturday's game. There was a couple guys that weren't active during that game. Tyler Baker-Williams, I don't expect to play this coming up Saturday. Could surprise some people. Doran has said day-to-day for weeks now, but don't expect him to play. And then, he plays the nickel position. Cyrus Fagan, former Florida State player, was knocked out of that game in the first half, didn't play the second half, but everything that we're hearing so far is that he should be fully healthy. The only other guy that won't be on the field is Trent Penix. He's a tight end that actually played really well against Florida State last year, caught 2 really long passes, one for a touchdown against Florida State last year. He will not be playing in this game. He was out 4 to 6 weeks after an ankle injury in the season opener. But yeah, everybody else health-wise, so far from what we're hearing, is going to be good on Saturday.
So kind of what was the feeling of Clemson? Like what happened? Do they feel like they had a chance? They kind of just folded. To use my guy, Mr. Go 30. Moment got too big, something like that. But just the thought process and the energy coming out of that game.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was they just didn't make plays. I mean, you look at some of the opportunities they had. The defense held for, I think it was like 5 straight drives. It was like 6 drives in a row where Clemson had 1 field goal out of all of that, and NC State just wasn't able to come up with any points offensively. They just weren't able to put together long drives. And it's funny because that's something that Florida State's defense really wants you to do. They're going to try to force you to dink and dunk your way down the field as opposed to giving up long plays. And I think that's something that NC State wants to be able to do. Tim Beck talked about it today. Like, we don't want to be patient. We want to be able to hit some of those shots down the field. And they weren't able to find them this past weekend. It would be interesting to see if they're able to find it this weekend because it was a test in patience. And they kind of failed in some areas. The first half, they were able to put together 2 pretty long drives and found some success. But yeah, they've missed a lot of opportunities in that second half.
Should FSU fans, at least definitely the team too, expect a packed crowd there in Raleigh this weekend? We're used to having not so great games go up there for Florida State. We were used to having that for the last couple of years, almost a decade now, or a decade. Well, what's the crowd looking like? Is there still energy? I know you have the loss at Clemson, but I'm expecting to see a pretty fired up crowd up there on Saturday night.
Yeah, this game on Saturday was sold out before they played the Clemson game. So they've known for a while it was completely sold out. This was, the last 2 games they played were sold out. I believe the season opener might have been too. So I think this will be 4 straight sellouts to start the season. This is Raleigh is always a place that's going to get, after it for NC State football. It's almost 60,000 capacity, so it's not nearly as big as some of the stadiums across the ACC, but it's been a really good atmosphere for NC State. They've won 13 straight games at home now at this point, dating back to 2020. So it's not nearly as close as the 37 that Clemson is that now, but it's top 5 in the country in terms of game day atmosphere and being able to I don't want to say game day atmosphere, but in terms of home game winning streak, and that's because of the game day atmosphere.
Who are some of the guys that? Oh, my bad, Mark. Who are the guys that Florida State fan, the casual Florida State fan, should be looking out for and rooting against in this game?
Well, offensively,
obviously you're rooting for them, but
Well, I was going to say, offensively, Devin Leary is the guy that everybody knows coming into the season. I think some people think, the performance he's had so far has been underwhelming. He's not, putting up big touchdown numbers, but he really didn't do that at the start of last season either. It didn't happen until conference play. He led ACC last year in touchdowns and passing touchdowns with 27 last year, and he only had 8 before that, during non-conference play. So it's not that much different compared to where they were at last year. But then if you look at the rest of the offense, the other guys to know in the passing game, Thayer Thomas is the big one to know. He has 2 touchdowns so far this season, not great numbers, but he's kind of their safety valve. So when they need to get a third down, they need to, pick up a short gain to be able to get to a, third and manageable. He's their guy. They've been able to hit him over the top a couple times this year too. And then in the backfield, Jordan Houston has kind of been the lead back going into the season, but there's a guy named Demisumo Karngbe, which is a difficult name to say, but he's very, very hard to take down. Through the first 4 games, he had nearly 30 tackles broken as a running back in the backfield. So he'll be one to look out for this coming up weekend. And then defensively, the linebacker core, coming into the season was considered one of the best in the ACC, if not the country. Peyton Wilson, Drake Thomas, and Isaiah Moore have all won all ACC in the past for their play on the field. And then the defense, the secondary has been really strong so far this season too. It got burned a little bit this past weekend against Clemson, but most of those were, short underneath passes that they weren't able to get, they weren't able to get a tackle. So that's something they've worked on a lot this week. So those are going to be the guys to really know.
One last thing on my end, I want to flip things. What do you think NC State has to do in order to beat Florida State? What are maybe NC State's weaknesses that you've seen throughout the first quarter of this season, or maybe some threats? I know right now big names for Florida State is Jared Verse, obviously Jordan Travis, Johnny Wilson with his height at the wide receiver position. What on your end for NC State are they going to have to do better or prepare for on their side to come away with the win in Raleigh?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that reared its ugly head this past weekend was not being able to get to the quarterback. I mean, they were able to get pressure. They were able to, create or force, DJU to kind of get the ball out of his hands quickly, but they weren't able to get any sacks. They weren't able to finish some of those. And it left him at times being able to get comfortable in the pocket and finding ways to roll out. They were able to put together long, productive drives at times. And that led to, NC State being winded. And that's something that they really need to be able to improve on this coming up weekend. Because Jordan Travis is a guy that, though he hasn't showed it, he can roll out of the pocket too. Obviously, that was, his big selling point initially when he first became the starter for Florida State. He hasn't actually faced NC State. This is his third year as a starter, and he hasn't faced NC State once. So this is an opportunity for them to be able to prove that they can keep contain on him and get to him. And I think that's what's going to end up, if NC State's able to do that defensively, that helps them in a big way. Offensively, they got to hit some of those deep shots. I know Florida State is a team that really wants to be able to keep you, to short and manageable and make you be able to force you into mistakes on the offensive side of the football. Whereas NC State, they really need to be able to hit some of these deep shots and be able to find some ways to do that and stick to the running game. That's something that they kind of sold out on this past week. It says 21 rushes when you look at the box score. They really only ran the ball actually 16 times this past weekend against Clemson, even though Jordan Houston was a guy who was averaging over 4.5 yards per carry. But for whatever reason, they went away from the running game, even though they were within a score the entire game up until the first drive of the fourth quarter for Clemson. So this is something they really need to do is be able to stick to the running game and try to get some of those deep shots over the top too.